Welcome to Investment Wars. I'm Joe Halpern, and this is a show about the stories we tell in markets and investing. We all love a good narrative, but we tend to build them from the data points that confirm what we already think and ignore the parts that don't. In investing, that instinct is expensive. A hot take is not a strategy. Access is not the same as responsibility. And smarter investing usually starts by asking better questions. On this show, we break down big macro themes, pressure test ideas everyone is talking about, and dig into the deeper forces shaping how markets actually work and how investors should think. Investment Wars is brought to you by Obsidian CIO. We help advisors and investors think more clearly, invest more deliberately, and build portfolios with institutional discipline, not just more product. This is episode 38, titled Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with Andrew Miller. Andrew Miller is a Canadian transportation consultant, author, and speaker on innovative mobility and smart cities. He writes Changing Lanes, a twice-weekly Substack on mobility innovation, and is co-author of The End of Driving, Automated Cars, Sharing versus Owning, and the Future of Mobility. I'm super excited to speak with you today, Andrew. I think there's so many connotations along AI, robotics, infrastructure, and the like. And so this applies generally to the economy. The way government makes decisions is going to be really, really important. And then how commercial takes advantage of it. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Joe. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great. So I caught wind of you through your American Affairs piece on why American passenger trains are so slow. And it rewired it for me. I never thought of why they were so slow. I just knew they were slow, and it aggravated me. And so thanks for answering that question. Do you mind giving the audience a kind of a 30-second cheat code on why the US seems so behind?
So it seems so behind the United States rail system because we're comparing it to what the Europeans and the Japanese have. And what the Europeans and the Japanese have is excellent intercity passenger rail, but what they don't have is excellent intercity freight rail. You really have to choose one or the other. I'll spare your audience the details. They can look it up in American Affairs if they want to know all the gory bits. But essentially, if you're building a rail network, you have to pick whether you're optimizing to move people or to move goods. And what we've done in the United States and Canada is optimize to move goods, which has worked exceptionally well for us. We've got shipping rates for goods across the continent that are a fraction of what they pay in Germany, and even less than that in Japan. And so the consequence of that is we can't have good intercity passenger rail. What we have is slow and sad, but you can't have everything. You have to choose, so forgive the expression, to pick a lane. We've picked a lane, and we should be celebrate what we have, not deplore what we don't.
Got you. And again, go check out the article, everyone. But in there, part of that, at least in America, I can't speak to Canada, is actually unbridled and I think positive capitalism in making decisions that were just economically beneficial across the spectrum. My understanding is that there's one country in the world that actually has both freight and passenger, and that is China. Are they just better than everyone else, or is there something else going on there?
Well, China's got the advantage of several things. Is that one, they're starting much later than everybody else. Uh, and choose whenever you start late, you get to leapfrog. You get to go move right to whatever the best technology is. That's helpful. But also, they have a government that is perfectly willing to set aside competing concerns to say, we are going to build a high-speed rail through this corridor. And if you don't like it, too bad, we are doing this. It's not a sort of government I would want to live under. But if you want, it is exactly the sort of government that can really get large infrastructure projects done fast and at lower cost, because a lot of the procedural concerns that we have in the West, some of which are well taken, others of which I'm less excited about. But if you don't have to deal with any of them, boy, is it easy to build big things. Not just rail, but ports, but subways, but everything.
Got you. And what it really comes down to, if I understand it correctly, is to have both freight and passenger, you need two rail lines, and that's incredibly expensive. And so you just have to decide one way or the other which way you're going. And if you decide to have both, it's just a huge subsidy game.
Yeah.
Ultimately to get there. That's the gist I think of it.
We could
In
put it slightly more precisely, which is, do you want a fast train or do you want a slow train? Freight doesn't need to be fast. It can deal with a slow train, and it'll still get there in ample time, much faster than it would by air or by road. Uh, but building a fast train, that's really expensive and requires constant maintenance, which freight doesn't need. So if you build a slow system, you can get really cheap freight rate per ton movement cost for goods. But if you're moving people, you have to really build up the system, and you cannot do both. They get in their way. So it's a question of how much do you want speed and how much are you willing to pay for it.
And when you say that freight rates are a fraction in the US and Canada of what they are in Europe and Japan, that's just straight up freight rates, regardless of meaning whether it's by train or by trucking or otherwise. I imagine truck and train and boat or probably boat, then train, then truck are the cheapest.
You're right. I mean, if you're looking globally, the cheapest way to move goods over long distances is by boat. So, like, that's what, if you want to know why there's so much production in China that is then shipped to every other part in the world, it's because once you get those goods onto a boat, the cost to move it is a fraction of a cent per kilometer. The Europe has got the advantage of there's waterways all around the continent, and they don't have the Jones Act. So that's a real
Yeah.
competitive disadvantage that the United States has completely inflicted upon itself. There's no one else to blame for the idiocy of the Jones Act. But the Jones Act means that shipping along the coasts or from around the coast is just not on for the United States. So since you really can't do marine inland and uh, you can't do it on the coast, what's left is rail. But rail does an excellent job. Europeans, because they can use some boats and be, they've kept their rail for moving people, and so they move many more goods by truck.
Got you. Okay. So I mean, they made a decision that sounds like partially due to the fact that they could use boats and trucks, and then partially due to just pre-existing passenger lines and a preference or a focus on passenger rail over freight rail. Is that kind of like part of the equation in Europe?
Yeah, there are all these pre-existing rail lines in Europe that did what we want them to do. They go right to the city center because in the era in which they were built, Europe then was more like China today. If the government wanted a thing, it got the thing. There wasn't a lot of barriers in the way. But once you've got rail, it's the king of advantages there is that it goes from downtown to downtown. So having those advantages, they especially after the war, they kept them. Similarly, in Japan, and after the war, this was an advantage that they had, so they kept it. They could move goods by boat. Rail was moving people by rail was the right thing to do. In North America, because we started from a position where uh, we needed to ship goods. There was a lot more interest in moving all the grain and the livestock and all the things of the Trans-Mississippi West to the coast where the people were. Uh, in the back in the Gilded Age when rail was being built, that's what it was really being built for, was
Right.
moving goods and people. But when then the automobile came along, Americans made the decision, the rational one, to say, people like driving their cars. Let's let them do that. Let's shift more of the rail to freight. And that's what's happened. It's been that way for the last 5 decades.
Now, I want to shift towards cars, but I want to make a little pit stop with
Hmm.
trucks, um, and autonomous trucks, or I guess is that the right term? I guess autonomous trucks in terms of, I think if I understand it correctly, the first automation should happen in long haul trucking. The thought is you could put a truck on a road at 1 in the morning. You could drive until 6 in the morning on a federal highway with light traffic, and there's less going on than what's going on in cities, for instance, and Waymos. And that should create some efficiencies. Could you give a little bit of an update of where we are in world of automating trucks and even, I guess, this concept of autonomous, because I think that would be like a chain of trucks all talking to each other. Can you speak a bit about that technology and where we are with that?
Sure. And the only thing that I would correct you, Joe, is you said that this is the thing that should happen first. It's already happened. It's happening. It's happening right now. So the biggest company in automated trucking is Aurora, and they are running automated trucks in Texas right now. Uh, there's a Canadian firm called Gatic, which is operating automated trucks on the streets of Toronto between warehouses and warehouses right now. So it's not something we have to wait for. It's here. The only thing we have to wait for is how fast it's going to scale up. So I mean, the other thing is robotaxis. You say it's going to happen sooner. That's also happening right now. You can hail one in San Francisco or Phoenix or Shanghai or Beijing right now. So it's not about is it going to happen. It's going to about when is it going to happen where I live, wherever the person happens to be. So you say is it, the advantage of doing it on highways. There's an advantage and there's a disadvantage. The advantage is a highway is of all the places to drive. I mean, you will know this from your own experience. Uh, it's when you're a kid, you're thinking about getting a driver's license. Highways seem scary. Then when you're actually practicing, you discover, oh, it's actually easier to drive here because I can just get in my lane. I can maintain the speed as long as I don't hit the car in front of me. I just maintain a speed relative to other drivers. There's nothing to stop for. Usually, it tends to be a straight line. The curves are always very gentle. So it's a wonderful driving environment for a machine. Uh, cities get trickier. Waymo's learned to do it, but then Waymo is trying to move goods very well, not goods, passengers, very, very slowly. They handle uncertainty by moving slowly. That's not really what we want for our trucks. What we want out of our trucks is that there's predictability. We know when it's going to get there. So what is happening is movement from it's what a transport professional calls drayage, or 100 years ago they called it drayage. Today they tend to call it middle mile. Imagine a robot drives from a warehouse on the outskirts of New York City, then takes it all the way up the Hudson River Valley to a warehouse on the outskirts of Albany, and then it drops off its container. A human driver maybe got it to the warehouse in New York from the port. A human driver can take it from the warehouse in Albany to wherever it's going. But the middle part of that trip, the long highway trip, then a machine handles that. It handles the environment it knows, it handles the environment that it likes, and it can do it 24/7. It can do it at 3 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whenever you need it to. You don't have hours of service regulations. So, like human drivers, we correctly say you can only drive so many hours in a day and only so many hours in a week. And if you hit those thresholds, you have to stop driving for a certain amount of time. A machine, you don't need to do that. There's no HOS requirements. So you can amortize the value of that truck much more easily than you can with human trucks. So there's a lot of advantages to the model. Yes.
So there are 400,000, if I have my stats right, if I remember correctly, 400,000 truckers in the US. Could you speak a little bit? I mean, are they You kind of commented that we still need short haul. You'll need them in the city. Is that number going to get halved? And how do you kind of think about how that changes kind of the second order of things, meaning along those corridors now, for instance, truckers don't need to eat anymore. Gas stations may take a dip because there might be efficiencies created there, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of give us the long view of how automated trucking may change things. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of downstream effects. Like, first of all, I say that we're going to need short haul truckers. How long are we going to need short haul truckers? Uh, Waymo can drive in complex urban environments today, and it moves slowly and cautiously. But the longer Waymo operates, the more we will understand, the more data we will have about operating in environments like that, the easier it'll be for trucks to leave those depots on the outskirts of town and go into other parts of the metropole or even right downtown. It's going to happen longer because it's a more complicated problem, but it's a problem that's going to be solved. And knowing what we know now, there's no reason to think that it won't happen in just a few decades. So yeah, short haul drivers have gotten an edge for now. But well, think about what that means, though. How many full-time professional drivers are there? There are a lot. You cited the number, but that's people that have been in it for more than a year. Trucking is a profession that's got immense amounts of turnover. When you hear these stories, there always seems to be a trucker shortage. I looked into that story once because I was curious about it, and the answer is it's because there's a steady core of experienced multi-year drivers, but most people last a year and then they're out because long haul trucking, to put it in the vernacular, sucks. It's a terrible
Yeah.
drive. It's a terrible job. Wrecks your back, makes you fat, and it's mostly boring except when it's terrifying. So it's not surprising that people don't want to be in this. Automating away jobs like that, it's a good thing, but the downside is that yeah, you don't need a truck stop anymore. You don't need motels. You don't need diners. There's lots of support along the highway that is less and less important. Even in the near term, what you're going to see, you mentioned it earlier, uh, trucks can convoy when they're automated. They can
Yeah.
convoy, you can get really long haul, uh, what would the right term be? They're welded together. And as as far as I can tell, there's really no limit to how long you could make that. The only reason to cut it short is because sometimes a human driver needs to get around them. And if it's like if it's 4 miles long, that's the law. You can't block the off ramp that long. So you need to cut them off after 8, 10 rigs just to accommodate other users of the highway. But now you can get very long convoys. So, and you're going to see that because that's even more efficient. So in the near to medium term, trucking, as it moves towards this model, there's going to be a lot of different kinds of jobs that used to be done by people that we won't need done by people anymore.
And you mentioned short haul decades. Long haul, do you see, I imagine, in a much shorter time frame? I mean, could you see that in like by 2035, most long haul is done by automated trucking?
2035, some, 2035, most. Now, as
Okay.
much as I would love to see it, it is so easy to overestimate how quick things can change. There is so much drag and inertia outside of the world of software. I mean, it's people will very easily pick up a smartphone like they did between 2007 and 2012. Or I mean, I suppose with ChatGPT or Claude, that's had the fastest take up of any new technology, I think, uh, ever, some people say. But that's just something you do with a computer. Like actually changing the physical world, I mean, people are still using buildings that were built 100 years ago. Uh, Changing the physical world is expensive and time consuming, and people like the status quo. So it will happen, but as to when most long haul trucking, I don't think that's going to be 2035. I'd be surprised if it's 2045. But every year that passes, the volume is going to go up.
I live in a building that's 100 years old. I moved in there from a building that was 200 years old. So, point taken. Um, does autonomous trucks start to compete with trains at some point because of this created efficiency? Could you see a world where you just don't need trains anymore because you could kind of speed up on the roads these sorts of vehicles?
It depends on where those trucks are going. Like if what you're doing is going to or from a port, it's hard to see how rail's advantage of like bringing these immense freight trains just completely jammed with containers right to the port, where then it's loaded off a ship, or conversely, it's taken off the port, off the ship through the port onto a train. The interesting thing is, what if you need to take it not from a port, but from point A to point B within the continent? Then, right now, to get a truck from the port of Long Beach out to Duluth, you can do that by truck it'll take you 24 hours if you want to do it that way. Rail, 48. Rail's a lot cheaper, but if you're not coming from a port and you want to get to Duluth from Kansas, yeah, increasingly you can see a world where it competes where trucking competes with rail.
Yes.
But there's something I think you might find interesting is like, what if it's not competing? What if it's complementary? Like, I can easily see a world where a port or a depot or just a warehouse is all about automated switching of a container, and you can take it off of a rail bed and onto a truck in one smooth motion. If that's the case, and I don't see why you couldn't do it other than you'd have to build the facility and you'd have to get the Longshoremen's Union to agree. But we already have containers, we already have trains, and increasingly we have trucks. If we can just find a way to automate the smooth transference of a container from one form of conveyance to another, well, then you can just mix and match whatever modes you need so that it gets there, and then you can optimize for how fast you need it versus how cheaply you need it. I think that is a really interesting future, but it depends upon investment in like the capital being deployed to these sorts of facilities. I'll be watching closely in the next few years to see if that's if that's the sort of investment that we see.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting, and ultimately, it's innovation at work, creating efficiencies. To your point, where you could just take one container and send it to one spot on its own, and the rest you could just throw on a train. So, really, really interesting. When writing the end of driving, what were some findings or implications that surprised even you that the audience may appreciate?
The thing that surprised me most was if we get the future that we're likely to get, where Waymo and Zoox are competing with robotaxis, it's the number of cards that need to fall in the right order to get the best possible outcome. So if you get by my view, the best world for robotaxis is ones where they're so common. It's you never have to wait more than a few minutes. It can take you from anywhere to anywhere cheaply and quickly and reliably. You need to have a certain number of robotaxis on the road for that to work. But for that to happen, what needs to happen is that the city government doesn't get to have like a medallion system where they say, okay, Waymo, you can have 300 cars on the road during the peak period and no more than that, because otherwise it'll increase congestion. A world like that, you get all these robotaxis thrown out there, in addition to everything else. It's enough to cause more congestion, but it's not enough to change anyone's behavior where they say, okay, I'm not going to buy a second car. So you perversely an attempt to limit congestion gets you a very bad world. You need to have a government that wants to see robotaxis on the street. But then let's say we get that. And they say, okay, Waymo, have at it. Make sure that everyone gets a ride whenever they want it. Then, perversely, the problem is where do you where do you get people to get in and out of the car? If people are still parking on the street and there's no place to park, well, it'll just double park and that'll slow everything down even more badly. So what you need is city governments to take seriously. Curb access has got to be a thing that we protect. That there's some curbs that you can park your private car in all day. There's some curbs you can park it there all week if you want to, but there's some curbs you can park it there for 3 minutes. And if you're longer than that, you get fined. And the fine's got to be certain, and the fine's got to be big enough to bite. I am not sure our cities are brave enough to pursue that. I am not sure that people would want that, even though it would get them a better outcome. The same way that no one in New York wanted congestion pricing. Till they got it, then now they love it.
Yeah.
But no one ahead of time wants it. You have to do it for people to appreciate the value. That's an even tougher sell to say, okay, there's on this block, no one gets to park for more than 3 minutes, and our fine is going to hurt you if you flaunt that. Building up political constituency for that is not going to be easy.
Yeah, I may be an outlier. I live in New York City. I was very pro congestion pricing. I'm pro anything that gets cars off the road and anything that turns roads into walkways. And I love, by the way, Waymo. Anytime I'm in San Francisco, I was just in Scottsdale for the first time in a while. I'm all Waymo. I love it. If I never had to drive again, I would never drive again. What I appreciated about the end of driving, and I think after reading a lot of it, it'd be great to have, because I do think I think you mentioned in side conversations that it was put in the textbook world. And I definitely think it could be, I think it's such a fascinating book. It'd be great to put it within a non-textbook format for those, because you immediately, you're an expert on the subject matter, and I'm not, and most people aren't, and it's a really fascinating subject matter based on my own preference, which I think I'm probably in the minority. It's like, yeah, I would take Waymo everywhere. I'd love to get rid of my car. And then you start working through it of like, well, what about if your kids do sports and you're just keeping it all in the trunk, or even better, you have a 0 to 4-year-old and you need a baby seat, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people just love their car. It's America. Americans love their cars. I'm American, but I'm an outlier, as mentioned, from that standpoint. And there's all these reasons. And then to your point, along how do you change the digital city? Not the digital city, sorry, the infrastructure of the city to match the new realities. Could you speak a little bit to what cities are doing well, what like maybe that's Phoenix, et cetera, but what cities are kind of setting up properly for the future, and kind of what some of the worst case scenarios are in the future that you kind of go through in the book?
Well, thank you very much for your kind words about the book. You're not the first person to tell me that they think that the book is really great, but wouldn't it be nice if it was written more for a mass market and priced at a third of what the publisher in their wisdom has chosen to set it to? And I completely agree. I'm certainly thinking about how to get the insights across in a more accessible way. It's one reason I'm here. But to your question is, what cities are doing things right? What cities are not doing things so well? So it's very heartening to me to see places like Phoenix and Austin being in that red state way, which is, we believe in freedom, and we're not going to restrict the freedom of the robotaxi companies. They can try to make money here. If it doesn't work out, that's on them. But we're not going to deny the freedom of the robotaxi companies to operate, nor of our residents to use this service if that's what they want to do. San Francisco doesn't have quite that same libertarian spirit, but thanks because the robotaxi companies are so prominent in the tech world there. The state government has overruled San Francisco and especially Los Angeles to allow the technology to work. And like with congestion pricing, once you see it work, more people are in favor of it than are not. What I see too disquieting examples of cities that aren't working out, and it's a useful metaphor because they're on opposite sides of the country. Boston, if the good aldermen or city councilors of Boston would have their way, you just can't do it. It's flatly disallowed. You cannot bring an automated robotaxi in here because that would cost jobs, and we're all about fighting for jobs, which always makes me grit my teeth because it says, oh, we're standing up for the little guy. And it's like, oh, the little guy doesn't want a rideshare ride that's half the cost of what they are now. The little guy doesn't want cheap, reliable, safe transportation. The little guy doesn't want a city where people don't get killed in auto accidents. It seems like it's a very privileged account of who the little guy is. But leave that aside. Like that at least is easy to recognize, which is just flat no, we're not going to do this. I It's equally disquieting to see what Seattle is doing, where Seattle's attitude is okay, we are willing to experiment. You can have a certain number of robotaxis on the streets, but we're going to tell you what times a day and we're going to tell you how many. That in itself is not so unreasonable. Like any regulator is going to say at first, this is how many, this is when and where. But then you get into, and you cannot put your garages in industrial lands because those are a threat to communities of people of color. Or you have to have a special levy, and we're going to take all the money from those and we're going to give them to specifically ride-hail drivers that have lost their jobs, and on with all sorts of special requirements and hoops that have to be met. And I suppose every single one of them is well meant, although it's strange. We've got it's a matter of great concern if Waymo is going to put a depot of its electric cars near a historically poor set of residential area on industrial land. But if Sony wants to put a factory where they're going to build PlayStations, no one cares. That's not, only Waymo gets this special burden because it's a robotaxi firm. No one else does. Or, we're going to make sure that Waymo pays to make whole all the poor ride-hail drivers that have lost their jobs. We never made Uber pay into a fund for all the poor taxi drivers that lost their jobs. But Waymo, again, because it's big tech, it's one firm, and you think you can soak it pretty easily, you do. Any one of these might not be so obnoxious, but when you see them all gathered together, it strikes me as less a model for good governance and more just a soft veto. We're going to like really make this so difficult that they don't want to come to our city. That's a bad model. I much prefer the forthrightness of an Austin or a Phoenix that is like, we're open for business. And if buyers can find sellers, as long as you are safe and you pay your taxes, that's good enough for us. I would love to see more of that kind of the American spirit.
I hear you. Yeah, it's always some amount of people fighting change and fighting for existing constituencies as opposed to future constituencies. I want to tease out one comment you made there, because I think the audience would find it really interesting, which is some of the use cases for Waymo's taxi replacements, et cetera. And you commented on share driving, and then I think you kind of even touched on it on potential, I'll call it transit or last mile transit replacements that can be done actually by government as opposed to by commercial. Could you tease that out a little bit more of just some of the benefits, again, this flexibility that these automated / autonomous cars could create?
So I always have to preface this by saying I am a big fan of public transit. I spent 4 years of my life designing a new bus extension to a rapid transit system, and I'm very proud of that work. I think transit is an important part of any city worth the name. There's got to be a way to be able to get around in a reliable, cheap, and safe way for people that don't have a car. Having said that, the problem in North America is that almost all of our cities, there's a few noble exceptions, like particularly on the coasts, all of our cities were laid out after the automobile and are optimized for the automobile. And it's sufficiently low density that even if you could afford to run all the subway tunnels that you would want, and it's so expensive to do that, there's so few people per square mile that you'd never be able to make money running that system. So, and you can't, so you can't drill the subway tunnels. You can't, lay down the light rail. What's left? Well, there's buses. Well, the problem with buses is it's the same thing. It is really expensive to run a bus across a wide area, picking up only a few people every few miles. So consequently, most North American cities, what they do is they run a bus, but it comes, you know, 3 times an hour, and it'll take you, and it goes far out of its way to pick up everyone that it can before reaching its destination. It's a terrible experience. It's really time consuming. And so as soon as anyone can buy a car, they do, and they don't use it. And that means that they don't get ridership, so they don't get more money, so there's no optimal appetite to expand it. So it stays stuck in this terrible equilibrium. Well, driving automation is a way to open up that equilibrium. Imagine that you have a shuttle bus, and instead of running a sad regular bus along a regular route that comes 3 times an hour, it comes to where you are, just like an Uber does. You press a button on your phone, and a few minutes later, it appears where you are. You don't have to walk to a stop. And then it takes you to the nearest light rail stop or the nearest subway stop or the nearest, major artery where there's a bus that leaves every 5 minutes running right along that, maybe in its own lane. That is the kind of public transit that would work. It would be, you couldn't have a robotaxi, you couldn't have an automated bus take you from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. You'd lose money on that. But replacing feeder buses with shuttles and replacing express buses with automated buses, you could absolutely do that. That would be cheaper than what we have today. It would be better service. People would like it more. And it's about the only solution to improve transit in so many American cities. The only thing standing in our way is public transit agencies agreeing to do this because it's so different for anything they've done before. Let's see our earlier remarks, Joe, about how people fear change. But I think that's a change that we really have to start advocating for, because if we don't do it, then what happens is the robotaxis arrive on private fleets, and everybody just takes those, and the bad equilibrium for public transit today gets even worse, maybe goes away. Like, this really is a change or die situation.
Yeah. No, what you just described is, I mean, to me, it's very exciting because it just opens up so many more areas that could connect to major cities and work areas, which increases productivity for people and also increases the real value of the property there. I remember as a kid, in Queens, so you're still in a really dense city. There were livery cabs that would drive along the routes of buses that came infrequently, and it was illegal, so they'd honk their car. It was back in the day, so you give them 50 cents or a buck, but they would just ride up and down those bus routes, and it was worth it for them because they're a small car, 3, 4 people, and they could do it very quick, as opposed to a bus, which, as you said, had to stop in so many places. And it's a fantastic solution that, again, I think increases the capability of people to come from further faster, which increases the value of real estate in the area and has all these dramatic benefits. So in terms of winners or losers, and the answer may just come down to governance, and it could be equal for all of them. But cities versus suburbs versus rural, do you see one winning versus another losing, or it really does come down to governance amongst them all and how they kind of take advantage of new technology?
So the answer to that question depends an awful lot on whether it is ever affordable to have a privately owned self-driving car. And the jury's still very much out on that. Lots of people think that self-driving, the pithy phrase is it's a thing you rent, it's not a thing you own. But that's trying to paper over the fact that it's an open question. There's lots of reasons why you might not own that 20 years from now, your Toyota Camry does not drive itself. The chief one being insurance and liability, is that it's not wouldn't be clear who is responsible if there's an incident, if it's you or if it's the system. All it would take is a few people to have the system going, and then the owner of the car, when there's an incident, say, "Oh, well, it's on you, not us," to chill any desire to own those. But let's stipulate that that problem gets solved. If it does, if in 20 years you can have a private car that doesn't even have a steering wheel, it does all the driving for you under all circumstances. Elon Musk says the cybercab is going to be like that. It'll be on sale later this year. Elon Musk says a lot of things, so we will wait and see if that's true. But certainly in his mind, that's the model: is that you will be able to own a privately owned, fully functional self-driving car. In that world, I can see lots of people in the country, that's their self-driving. They never see a Waymo, they never see a robotaxi. There's not enough people out there for a robotaxi to make money, even operating 24/7. But everyone just has their own car, and they have the advantages that you talk about. It's like, okay, well, I'm out here on my ranch and I want to go to the nearest big city, or hell, I want to go to New York. I'll just pack enough snacks and drinks, and off we go, and it'll drive all night and get me wherever it is that I want to be. That's a world where we get some of the benefits of self-driving, no matter where you live. But if the world that I've described doesn't come to pass, you really can't, there's enough barriers away to owning your own self-driving car. If it is something that you have to hire, cities get it. There's no question that every city over a certain density in the downtown core, robotaxis are there, and they will take you anywhere you want to go. I think the suburbs, the nearer suburbs, get it too, because you'll have all these cars. You're going to have a fleet that's sized for the downtown, for the peak travel. You'll want to use them even when it isn't the peak. So sure, you'll take them anywhere where there's demand. It'll be worth it to go out to the suburbs and handle that demand too. The country doesn't get it. So the country has to get by with like souped up driver assist systems where it'll do the driving for you, but you always have to be perched over the wheel with your foot on the gas and the brake to handle the situation. Not nothing, but a far cry from the world that we could have.
Fair enough. So this podcast is titled Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We hit the trains, we hit the automobiles. I feel like your view on airplanes and where we should go is a bit of an outlier take for me, at least. So I'd love you to share it with the audience of that view of how we could make airplanes and flight more efficient and maybe more exciting.
Well, I mean, it comes out of my view, like in Canada right now, we are embarked on a journey to build high-speed rail from Toronto to Ottawa to Montreal to Quebec City. And most right-thinking, or perhaps it's better to say left-thinking Canadians, think that's a wonderful idea. And they expect me to like it too, because look at you, you built public transit, you're a big fan of these things. I'm less convinced. I think that if you want to travel really good intercity travel, what you don't do is build high-speed rail. What you do is build an airport, because a plane can take you from wherever you are to any other city, not just in your country, but in the world. Air travel allows us a lot more flexibility. We're finally overcoming some of the old things that prevented supersonic travel from being commercially successful. So in a few years, we're going to have good supersonic travel again. So, you'll be able to go from San Francisco to Japan in half the time. Well, that's great. Why don't we just go all in on a world where everyone flies? Isn't that a better solution? There's two reasons why air travel is not what people have trouble celebrating air travel. One, carbon emissions. Like you can electrify a train, you can electrify a car. You can't really electrify a plane, at least not for anything that's other than a very short trip. And that I say, well, we can make carbon neutral jet fuel. It's a known process. You take a bunch of carbon out of the air, you can turn it into jet fuel. When it's burned, that carbon goes back into the air, net neutral. We know how to do that. There's two different ways to do it. The problem is in both cases, takes so much energy to do it. It's not cost competitive. But we're going to have to, that just means we have to build power plants. And it looks like with AI and data centers, we're going to be building a lot more power plants anyway. So why not also make green jet fuel and fly everywhere we want to go? Well, because of the second reason, and I think this is what you were getting at when you say I'm idiosyncratic. The second reason is because flying sucks. You have to get there so many hours early. You have to go through all the security screening. Your luggage gets searched. You get searched. You get X-ray scanned. It's a humiliating and uncomfortable and time-consuming process. So my view is, well, why not let's just stop doing that? And people will say, well, don't you remember 9/11? We stopped, if you don't do airport screening, your planes get turned into guided missiles. And I say, that was true in 2001, but it hasn't been true for the last 25 years. These days, the cockpit door of an aircraft, they're all sealed. You can never get from the interior of the cabin onto the flight deck. So you can never turn a car into a guided missile. But also back then in 2001, if someone started causing trouble on a plane, we were all trained by decades of people wanting to hijack the plane to go to Cuba. Everyone understood, oh, this is a negotiation. We just sit tight, we're quiet, we do what they say. There'll be a negotiation, they'll solve the problem. 9/11 cured us of that too. Now, if someone starts to cause trouble on an airplane, the flight attendants, the other passengers, jump them. That's what happened to the so-called underwear bomber. That's what happened to the shoe bomber. No one is going to let someone hijack a plane now. So consequently, what is it that we need to screen for? I think we should still have X-rays. I don't think you should be allowed to bring a gun or a knife on a plane. But so much of the screening we've introduced since 9/11 is no longer protecting against threats, and it takes so much time. It's not really adding value. We could get rid of it. It would save us money. We'd have a more pleasant experience and a faster trip. Uh, I can say that because I'm not running for office. I think if I was a politician, people would be really mad at me. But it's precisely because I'm not a politician I can say that. And I want to spread the good word. So much of airport security is unnecessary. You will be safe even if we get rid of it. And it would make everyone's lives so much better.
You wanted to get towards the train travel where you're going from New York City to Washington and you could show up 5-10 minutes earlier, jump on and be good. I guess is where
Yeah.
you're okay. Something for the audience to mull about. So if someone wants to kind of stay up on this space, what should they look for over the next few years, outside of obviously reading Changing Lanes to stay up on everything that matters? What's the best way to stay up on this exciting area?
Well, I think reading Changing Lanes is obviously the best way to do it because I do keep my finger on all of these different pulses. I think the other thing to do, you've got your audience, Joe. They're very investment savvy. They read the business trades. They read prospectuses. Watch what is happening with the big mobility companies. I think that you are going to see right now all the emphasis is on AI. Everyone loves to talk about how many jobs they're getting rid of with AI. That's a sideshow. And watch where the money is going. Watch what a play company like Waymo is able to raise. The more of these raises that you see, the more you're going to know that they're taking aboard this technology, they're making it more efficient, they're streamlining their operations. That's what I tend to do. Like follow the money. That's where innovation is going. I think, the specific advice I gave earlier is watch for investment, particularly in warehouse. It's not a sexy area. I don't think people think about it as a place to put a lot of their money, but I am convinced we're going to see a new wave of like fully built for automation warehousing. If we have that, it unlocks so many other things, and the people that do it first make more money. So uh, that's what I want to see. That's what I'm going to be watching for. So do what I do, and like read the IPOs, read the prospectuses.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for coming on today. And I think it's such a fascinating space that's so important economically and from an investment standpoint. So thanks for sharing some of your wisdom and thoughts.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Joe.
Have a great day. That's it for this episode of Investment Wars. We're not here to chase narratives. We're here to challenge them, because better investing is not about having the loudest opinion. It's about having the clearest process. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify so you don't miss an episode. And if you're a financial advisor, check out our companion show, Advisor Wars, where we tackle the business of advice. Topics like alternatives, taxes, AI, cash management, and how growth-oriented firms scale smarter. If you're an advisor interested in partnering with Obsidian CIO, or you'd like to suggest a guest, reach out at ocio@obsidiancio.com. As Obsidian CIO sponsors the podcast to further educate and provide critical thinking about the factors that affect markets and investing. The podcast does not provide investment advice. Investment advice is offered only to clients of Obsidian CIO who have entered into an advisory agreement and with whom Obsidian CIO has identified individual objectives, risk tolerance, and other investment needs. Thank you.